I funded my brother's college for 4 years, but he mocked me to my face. So I shut down every account and watched him panic. I am 31 years old and have been my family's unseen safety net for the most of the past 10 years. Someone had to step up after my dad fell into a debt hole and missed mortgage payments after losing his job during the 2008 crisis. At 22, I was that someone. I was sending money home while most of my pals were trekking throughout Europe or squandering their paychecks on expensive cocktails and concerts. It was just groceries at the start. The mortgage followed. Next came the tuition for my younger brother Jake, the cheerleading fees for my sister Rosalind, and my mother's monthly allowance, as she liked to refer to it, even though it had nothing to do with the month. "Short this week, can you help?" she would text, and I would arrange for it. Nobody inquired as to whether I had enough for myself. Nobody expressed gratitude. Instead, I received insulting comments. My mother detested the fact that I no longer attend church. My dad didn't consider my work in marketing to be a legitimate career. Jake made fun of the size of my place. I didn't drive 4 hours every weekend to visit, so Rosalind dubbed me emotionally unavailable, even though I was paying for the house they wanted me to return home to. But last Friday was the tipping point. It was meant to be an ordinary family phone call. I was discussing Rosalind's fall tuition, and the fact that my landlord had increased my rent once more on Zoom. I gently hinted that I might have to reduce the amount of help. "You know what? We don't want to see your face anymore." Mom leaned in at that point and hung up. Uncertain of what had just transpired, I gazed at my computer. My text message to her bounced. Blocked. I then looked at my email. Silence on the radio. Dad didn't respond. Neither Rosalind nor Jake responded. As if I were an alien who had let them down, they had closed ranks. I ought to have sobbed or screamed. I felt cold instead. Unambiguous. I went to work after writing one final message which read, "You won't see my money either." Not at work, but at cutting off all of the financial support I had established for them. When you're the one pulling the strings, it's odd how easily things can fall apart. "You won't see my money either," I texted that morning, and then I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of coffee. I wasn't rushing, for once. No rushing around with bank transfers. No figuring out in my head how much money I would have left over for groceries once everyone else had received their share. Just silence, the worthy kind of silence. The mortgage comes first. The payments came from me, even though my name wasn't on the deed. Like clockwork, a recurrent transfer was established years ago. 2 clicks were used to cancel. I verified it over the phone with the bank. I will no longer be sending money to their house from my account. Then there was Mom's joint account, which she utilized like a vending machine. I would arrange it up to allow her some independence and self-respect. She was able to treat me like an ATM more easily as a result. After draining the account, I closed it entirely. Upon being prompted to provide the reason by the bank agent, I hesitated for a moment before typing. Abuse of trust. The tuition payments followed. My email was still connected to Jake's college site. I canceled the saved payment method after logging in. It felt nice, so I even placed a note under billing contacts that read, "No longer financially responsible. The utilities are gone. Account for grocery delivery. Canceled." Even so, there was a moment of awkward silence when I called the landlord of their rental home and stated, "Hey, I won't be covering the rent anymore. You'll want to speak directly with the tenants from now on." His next words were, "Understood." Suddenly, I was at liberty. Not a word. No fireworks. Just a calm, strategic withdrawal. It was odd how simple it was to remove myself from their financial lives. It was like erasing files you didn't realize you were keeping. I wasn't worried about how to do too much for the first time in years. All I was doing was breathing. That stillness didn't last long, but I didn't anticipate a response at first. That night was the beginning. My phone buzzed as I was finishing dinner. Something easy. Something for me. Unknown figure. I let the voicemail go. Then one more. Then 2 consecutive texts. Jake's tuition was unsuccessful. Mom is going crazy. Give her a call. No names. Don't say hello, only demands. As if nothing had altered. The third message was from a completely different number. As soon as I opened it, I knew the tone. Teresa, my aunt, was there. She must have been lured in by Mom. Whatever's going on, your mom says you're being irrational. Can we talk? I didn't answer. The calls increased the following morning. A voicemail was left from a blocked number. Rosalind was the one. She spoke in a tremulous, quieter tone than normal. I'm not mad, I swear. I can't get a hold of anyone. My school emailed saying I have a balance or they'll drop my classes. Can you please just talk to Mom? She's not herself right now. She was in tears. Just tears. No guilt tripping, no shouting. And it broke something inside of me, I'll admit. I didn't call back though. I cared too much for too long. Not because I didn't care. Then, using a friend's number, Mom arrived. First, a text. Please, this has gone too far. Let's talk, like a family. She called a minute later. I let the voicemail go. And based on what I heard, she wasn't exactly upset. She spoke cautiously, almost beseechingly, but with the same pride. You've made your point, we get it. But this isn't how families act. We're not perfect. But we've always had each other. I don't know what you want from me. Do you want me to beg? And no apology, still. She didn't acknowledge what she said to me with a single word. They didn't even acknowledge that they had gone too far. A woman accustomed to having authority realized that the floor had abruptly disappeared. Their son was still alive. Their lifeline was gone. After a few days, you would think it would be simpler to ignore them, but it wasn't. It became more bizarre. The messages changed over time. I was initially terrified, then guilt. Then the history was rewritten. As if I hadn't paid for 4 years of his college tuition like it was a monthly Netflix subscription. Jake launched a wall of text messages about how I'd always made everything about money, and how he never asked for help anyhow. With a dramatic, I wish things didn't have to be like this, Rosalind responded as though I had abruptly vanished in the middle of the night. And then Mom's voice memo. I gave it a try. That was sufficient. You think we used you? That's not fair. We relied on you because we thought you wanted to help. You never said no. You always showed up. You were the strong one. She was correct, in the manner I'd always appeared, so that bit really got to me. Strength, however, is limited. It has become old. It deteriorates. Additionally, it's not family when people only ever support you after the checks stop coming in. A transaction, that is. I thus totally ignored them. The new numbers were blocked. All significant accounts have been moved to private. With one silent tap, I exited the family group chat. About it, I didn't post. I refrained from venting. I didn't strike back. I simply disappeared from their ledger. It's funny how quickly someone loses visibility when their name doesn't have a $sign next to it. The calls decreased at the end of the week. Silence crept in between the texts. They left a hole that didn't feel like a loss. It had the feel of vastness. Space to breathe. Space to reflect. There is space to envision a life free from obligations. I recognized then that I wasn't done giving them money. I had finished introducing myself. I slept in the morning after blocking the final number. The "no one needs anything from me" kind of way, not the indulgent, lazy kind. No phone that vibrates. No bank notifications. By Friday there was no mental inventory of who required what. Only the sound of my own breathing and the sun on my face. I brewed actual coffee. Not the instant crap I had been consuming to help pay my home electricity bill. As I sat at my kitchen table, I came to an almost ridiculous realization. I now own this money. I then turned on my laptop. I looked at my balance and opened my budgeting app, which I used to regard like a war report. I then began enumerating everything I had consistently said someday to. I'm going to travel someday. I'll start my own company someday. I'll invest in myself someday. Abruptly, someday it became today. I started by booking a flight to Lisbon, no stops over, a seat by the window. I kept it a secret. I didn't have to. I didn't need anyone's approval to disappoint them. No longer. I then scheduled a meeting with a small business advisor. For years I'd harbored a dream of opening a creative studio that specialized in branding for independent artists. I had aided countless others in creating their futures. Perhaps it was time for me to construct my own. I had accomplished more for my future by noon than I had in the previous 5 years. No phone calls. Don't text. Not guilty. Only freedom. and it had the same flavor as that initial coffee sip. However, I didn't necessarily block the memories just because I blocked the numbers. Like background noise you didn't notice until the silence made it clear, they infiltrated stealthily. Mom used to text me every Sunday at 9 a.m., and I would suddenly remember that while I was strolling down the street. Acerbic. Did the money come through yet? No salutation, no, how are you, just a reminder of my duties. Or, out of habit, I would hesitate when I was at the grocery store, reaching for something as basic as good cheese, because for years, every purchase I made was accompanied by guilt. When Dad saw a new jacket I had purchased on clearance, he once remarked, "It must be nice." Guess the rest of us just have to struggle. Helping was never the goal, it had to do with control. The kind of subtle, silent, sneaky control that creeps into your bones and makes you mistake it for love. It was louder than I had anticipated during that first week of silence, because I had to discover who I was for the first time without their need to define me. To be honest, I had no idea, not quite yet. However, I was beginning to learn. I went to a museum alone, bought a new sketchbook, started drawing again. Little things, small pieces of me I hadn't touched in years because I was too busy stitching together the pieces of their lives. I occasionally still looked at my phone, half expecting to see another number that might have slipped through the cracks. But they didn't. Eventually they stopped trying. Or maybe they finally understood that I meant it this time. That I was done. There's a strange kind of grief that comes when you stop being who everyone expects you to be. Not because you miss them, but because you start realizing how much of yourself you never really knew. The truth was, I had been a ghost in my own life for nearly a decade. I had moved cities, not because I wanted to explore, but because it made it easier to send money without questions. I worked late nights, not for ambition, but to afford my brother's textbooks. I stayed single, not because I wanted to, but because anytime I tried to build something with someone, I felt like a fraud. How could I invite someone into my life when that life wasn't mine to begin with? I was too busy funding other people's dreams. That week after cutting them off, I started piecing things together. Not just finances but fragments of who I used to be. I dug through an old drawer and found a dusty journal from years ago. Pages full of plans I'd forgotten I ever wrote. One entry read, "I want to open a space where people come to create. I want it to be beautiful, warm, a little messy, and a lot honest." I sat there rereading that line a dozen times. It was written in a coffee shop after a shift I barely survived, back when I still believed I'd have a life of my own someday. That dream of opening a creative studio was still there, just buried under years of maybe laters, and not until Jake graduates, and Mom needs new tires. But now, no more excuses. No more siphoning my energy into a hole that never said thank you. I emailed a realtor about commercial spaces in my area. I signed up for a small business course. I reached out to people I'd lost touch with. Not family, but the friends I pushed aside because they didn't understand what I was dealing with. And I told the truth. I'm finally doing something for me. The response was overwhelming. One friend said, "It's about time." Another replied, "I thought I lost you." They hadn't. I'd just been buried. But now I was starting to unearth something I thought was gone for good. Hope. There were still tough moments. Nights where I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I'd done the right thing. Moments where I missed the idea of family more than the people themselves. But those moments didn't define me anymore. What defined me was the sound of silence, not filled with guilt. The sight of my bank balance slowly rising. The feeling of drawing in that sketchbook, page after page, without apology. I was no longer the backup plan for people who never made space for mine. I have my own plan now. The silence lasted about 2 weeks. Then they tried again. But not directly this time. It was softer, more calculated. The kind of manipulation that's dressed up in concern and stitched together with nostalgia. A message came through Instagram. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey, just checking in. Your mom says you haven't been around much. She's worried. Is everything okay?" I looked at it for a while. The phrase was so careful. Haven't been around, not cut them off. Not after everything they said. It seemed as if the last decade of sacrifices had been wiped, rebuilt with a story that made them the abandoned ones. I didn't respond. 2 days later my dad emailed me. An actual email, something he never does. It was short. Whatever issues you have with your mother, we can work it out. You've made your point. Don't let your pride cost you your family. I sat there reading it over and over and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just the boring weight of familiarity. That was the language of our family. Pride, duty, point made. As if I'd thrown a tantrum instead of walking away from years of exploitation. But then came the ultimate crack. Rosalind. Her voicemail was left. No showmanship this time. Only her voice, tired and subdued. I know you think we used you. Maybe we did. I don't know. I'm not mad. I'm just tired. I didn't ask for this. None of us did. But she was mistaken there. They expected, even if they didn't ask directly. I was expected to arrive, pay, be modest, and remain silent. They were at a loss for what to do when I didn't, because my obedience had been their solace for years, their safety net, my sacrifice. They weren't mourning anyone now that it was gone. They were mourning a breadwinner. I believe they secretly understood they had lost me, because I had finally realized the truth, not because they were harsh or angry. I was unable to avoid seeing it. I paid the deposit on a studio space the same week. It had light, despite its flaws. Old floorboards, creaking windows, exposed pipes. In the afternoons, warm, golden light spilled into the back. With a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years, I signed the lease. I owned this. Not transient, not borrowed, and not dependent on keeping others afloat. The walls were painted by me. White with a single accent of rich green that gave the space a vibrant atmosphere. I arranged a large table with chairs that didn't match. Some art books were donated by a friend. I was assisted by another in hanging shelves. I kept it a secret from everyone. I didn't give a speech or post a grand opening. I simply sat down at my desk, opened the door, and let out a breath. I can still hear their voices in my thoughts on some days. Why don't you come home more? Your sister needs help with books. You know mom's not good with money. It's not a real career, but at least it pays. Now, however, they echo, far away, helpless. Bending is no longer my style. The wallet in the room isn't me. I'm not the handy phantom people summon when the tuition is due and the refrigerator is empty. I am who I am. And that's finally enough for the first time in my life. That year, spring arrived early. The kind of balmy breeze that fools you into believing the world is kinder than it actually is, and causes the trees to bloom too soon. I saw it as I was on my way back from my studio. My studio. A number you know. I didn't identify it, therefore I hadn't blocked it. For too long my hand lingered over the screen. Curiosity always prevails. I replied. Hey, Rosalind murmured in a faint, gentle voice. They want to have dinner. Just talk. No strings. I told them I'd ask you. A long pause ensued. She waited as if she had grown accustomed to being disregarded. Then she said, I think they miss you. I let the silence linger. Then I asked one important question. Did they apologize? She let out a sigh. They said they want to move on. I nearly grinned. It was there. Sorry, just jump right to the reunion scene and skip the bit when they confess what they did. I'm not coming, I declared. Why not? She asked in a broken voice that was not furious but rather something else. Perhaps confused. I worried that I had always meant it. Because it isn't healing to go on without taking responsibility. Denial is the cause. And that story no longer includes me. Another extended gap ensued. Then she said, I guess I'll see you around then. I didn't respond. We were both aware that she wouldn't. Almost painfully, the next weeks were calm once more. Burner texts are over. No voicemails filled with guilt. No, we must discuss emails. They seem to have finally come to terms with my leaving. Not to cover the expenses. Not to take on their embarrassment. Not to act as though it had all been completed, but rather as if it had just happened. Officially, I was no longer part of their tale. It was also serene. Peaceful, but not easy. And in that silence, I was able to accomplish things I had never permitted myself to do before. I used my studio to host a workshop, a branding course for creatives in the area. There were 5 people present. After their first client won, one of them sent me a thank you card while crying. It was pinned on the wall by me. I had dinner with a girl I had not spoken to in years. I didn't think I deserved someone who didn't need me, not because I didn't like her. She asked questions about my artwork as if she genuinely cared about the answers, and she laughed at my crude jokes. I was honest with her. Instead of transferring funds to another person's account, I began saving. I made another travel reservation. Just to explore, not to flee. To survive. Occasionally I would glance at my phone and think, this is how peace feels. Not a lack. Liberty. In retrospect, I have no regrets. I didn't give those years because they showed me how far I would go for love. And not when I stopped, because that's when I realized how far I was prepared to go for myself. Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Wife told me to man up, 2 weeks after my parents died in a car accident. Now she blamed me for her cheating because I was grieving. My wife Rachel and I have been together for 4 years. Our relationship had been almost ideal, or so I believed. We have similar interests, such as playing video games and going camping whenever we can. We both have well-paying careers and don't want children. Rachel is highly independent, which is the main reason I fell in love with her in the first place. We dated for 10 months before moving in together. Rachel and I have talked about our past, and she understands how much I despise cheaters. She shared my sentiments and told me how her ex-boyfriend destroyed her heart when she discovered him cheating with one of his exes. I was delighted we were on the same page about this. I enjoy being devoted and available to my spouse, and Rachel was the same in the beginning. However, when we became engaged, something changed in her. One day when we were drinking, she asked if we might have one free pass in our relationship. I didn't understand what she was saying at first, but she went on to explain that a free pass is when you can sleep with a celebrity, or someone you find exceptionally attractive without your partner thinking it's cheating. She asked if I'd ever considered having a free pass in our relationship. I laughed and shook my head, because I had never considered this possibility. I informed her that a free pass is nothing more than cheating, and that if she wanted one, she should leave me. Rachel remained silent as we continued to drink. I didn't think much about it after that day. However, I believe this was the first red light in our relationship. Months later, Rachel approached me, explaining that she had a colleague who was quite gorgeous, and had been persistently asking her out for quite some time. One day, at their office party, she gave in and kissed him merely to silence him. She informed me that she felt terrible about it and wanted to tell me, but her friends had discouraged her from telling me the truth, because they thought I would not understand. My first opinion was that what this person did was effectively coercing her, so I advised her that she needed to report him right away, and that she could file an HR complaint against him since this is a very serious matter. However, Rachel tried to dismiss it, claiming that it was no big issue, which made me suspicious. I questioned her why she told me this if she didn't think it was a big deal in the first place. Rachel informed me that she felt she wanted me to take action and face the guy, as all of her exes had done, and that she thought it was unappealing that I wanted her to go to HR instead. She then complained that I didn't love her enough, and that she would have confronted the woman if I'd kissed anybody else. At this point, I couldn't understand why Rachel was twisting the matter like this. I felt manipulated into a situation that made no sense. How could she expect me to react in the same way as her ex-partners? It was as if she couldn't bear the thought of me handling the problem in a sensible and responsible way. Her persistence in putting my love for her to the test left me with a bitter taste in my mouth. I informed her unequivocally that if she didn't report this to HR, I would presume she kissed the person of her own free will, and not because she was coerced to do so, which meant it was cheating, and I couldn't marry someone like that. Rachel's demeanor changed from fury to disbelief upon hearing this. She inquired whether I was serious and I nodded, emphasizing that I couldn't tolerate cheating. We had an argument for a while, and she kept emphasizing how everyone would look at her differently if she complained about the person and outed him. But I didn't care. And I reminded her that she shouldn't care either if what she told me was true. Finally, she reported to HR, and it appears to have been a major thing, as one might imagine. They ended up terminating the guy and assuring Rachel that she did the correct thing. I was pleased that Rachel stood up for herself. A week later, I received a message from a stranger. He claimed he was the person Rachel had kissed. In his response, he explained that Rachel kissed him with her own consent, and that he had never done anything improper. He claimed Rachel never wore the engagement ring around the office, so he had no idea she was even engaged, and her friends never mentioned it, which is why he thought it was appropriate to pursue her. He said all he wanted from me was to tell me the truth and apologize for kissing my girlfriend. Obviously, I never responded to his message because this guy had already been dismissed, and I trusted Rachel more at the time. Rachel and I wedded 2 months later at our dream wedding destination. It was a lovely ceremony, and we exchanged vows in front of our parents and the rest of our families. The beginning of our marriage was pure happiness. Everything was going well until I found something incriminating on her laptop. While she was out grocery shopping, my laptop was charging upstairs, so I accessed her laptop to check our travel information, because our trip was approaching. In Safari, under Often Visited, I noticed a Reddit account page that piqued my interest, so I clicked on it without thinking much. This is how I found out Rachel had a Reddit account that she had never told me about, where she exchanged obscene photos with random strangers. I browsed through the photos and noticed that she had edited out her face in every one of them, as did he. Their letters were not lovey-dovey and were entirely sexual, but what shocked me was how openly she shared our sex life with this complete stranger. I was at a loss for words. When she returned, I confronted her, and she was as pale as a sheet when she knew I had discovered her account. I urged her to explain herself because the photographs horrified me. She paused for a time, her eyes flitting uncomfortably before meeting mine, and then she began to speak slowly and hesitantly. She admitted that it was fascinating to send images to a stranger and participate in talks with him, although knowing they were banned. She told me it was just like porn, and didn't mean anything to her. She attempted to excuse, claiming that she had never declared any feelings for him, and that sending images with her face cropped out was not a big problem, because he would never find out who she truly is. I struggled to grasp her thinking, and what was driving her behavior. I asked her why she felt the need to do this, whether it was because she wasn't pleased with our marriage, but Rachel shook her head vigorously, her eyes pleading for understanding as she tried to argue that it wasn't like that, and that this was simply a silly act that meant nothing to her. She kept claiming she loved me and pleaded with me to let this go because it was nothing more than an embarrassing event, and she promised to remove the Reddit account right away. I wanted to shout and lash out in rage and frustration, but I chose to keep silent while I processed this new information. There was nothing else to say. No words could restore the damage that had been done. I must admit that following this, our sex life suffered because I felt misled and upset. I strained to find the desire to be near to her, to let down my guard and become vulnerable again. The thought of becoming intimate with her filled me with fear. Rachel sensed my unwillingness to overcome the gap that had formed between us. She attempted to reach out and mend what had been broken, but her attempts were insufficient. Every time I glanced at her, I could see her messages to the guy in my thoughts, which did not help. Just a week later, I received even worse news. While I was at work one morning, my parents were involved in a vehicle accident and were badly injured. I couldn't believe it. It was as if the ground had vanished beneath my feet, leaving me suspended in a state of shock and sorrow. I dashed to the hospital to check on my folks as quickly as I could. The doctors informed me that they were on life support because their organs were failing. The physicians honestly told me that their chances of survival were fewer than 50%. I remember sitting in the waiting room for hours on end, praying that they would suddenly awaken. Rachel did come and sit by me in silence, holding my hand. I kept hoping frantically for a miracle, some sign of change, but my parents' condition did not improve. My mother was the first to go, soon followed by my father. The only thing that reassured me was that they could die together. I collapsed on the ground and cried till my eyes ran dry. My heart was shattered into a million irreparable pieces, and I had no idea how to continue living after that. The funeral was extremely difficult for me since I didn't know how to remain calm in front of people. I must say that Rachel handled everything throughout this period. She let me mourn the loss of my parents while she made all the arrangements. Following their funeral, I withdrew within myself, cocooned in a shell of numbness, unable to express the extent of my grief. I became stuck in a crushing embrace of sadness and depression. I didn't have the energy to do ordinary activities and would spend the entire day in bed, mourning my parents and upbringing. My parents were my rock, and losing them was like losing a piece of myself. I did meet with my parents' lawyers, who informed me that they had left everything they owned to me, which was not surprising. What surprised me was that the collective asset was $2 million. I was astonished, but it made me sadder to realize that my parents had worked so hard their entire lives, and didn't live long enough to appreciate it. I never told Rachel or any of my relatives about my inheritance because I wasn't even in the correct frame of mind at the time to consider the money. However, I decided to take a lengthy leave of absence from my company. Now that I didn't have to worry about money, and had been a loyal employee for a long time, my supervisor graciously agreed to allow me the time I needed to grieve for my parents. However, only 2 weeks after my parents died, Rachel contacted me one evening and said she needed to talk to me about something very important. We sat down in the living room, and she began to tell me that she had had enough of seeing me mope around, and that I needed to get my ass up and attend treatment. Rachel told me that my behavior was abnormal, and that no one mourns as deeply over the death of their parents. She asked me to toughen up and quit crying. I was stunned by how nasty her statements were, so I tried to explain to her that my pain was unavoidable, and that grieving for my deceased parents for a month is completely normal for any human being. I told her that she had grieved for her childhood dog for months, and I had never questioned her, so she had no right to treat me this way. She was irritated and complained about how unattractive it was to see me cry. There was more back and forth, but she finally let it go. So I assumed this would be the end of it. Recently, my cousin Joseph messaged me to see how I was doing. Joseph and I were extremely close growing up, so it wasn't unusual for him to check in on me. However, he went on to inquire whether my wife and I were currently separated. I was perplexed by his query, and I said that my wife and I were still together. At the time, I dismissed his inquiry as being motivated by curiosity or perhaps care, but he quickly called me, so I answered. Joseph went on to say that he had just seen my wife walk out of a hotel with a man, and that the man and my wife hugged strongly, before walking away in opposite ways. He told me that the way they held each other was different from how friends hug, which is why he had asked if Rachel and I were still together. I reaffirmed that she and I were very much together, and I promised him that when she returned home, I would ask her about it. However, my cousin, being the more paranoid one, discouraged me from asking her. He informed me that it was preferable for me to go through her phone and see if she was cheating on me, since if she was already sleeping with this person, she might not accept it. I hate to admit it, but his statements made sense, given that Rachel had kissed a co-worker and even shared indecent photos with a complete stranger. So I decided it would be best if I did some research before approaching her, which I did. I searched through her laptop and phone but found nothing. There were no inappropriate texts or phone calls to anyone. I was beginning to question my cousin, and wondered whether he had confused someone else for Rachel. However, one weekend, while Rachel and I were sitting on the sofa watching TV, I noticed a phone vibrate. I looked around and realized that neither my nor her phones had received any notifications. Rachel must have noticed me glancing around because she suddenly excused herself to go to the restroom. I racked my head in uncertainty, as I was certain I had heard a phone vibrate, and it occurred to me that Rachel might have another phone. When she came out of the bathroom, I noticed a phone-shaped bulge in the side pocket of her sweatpants, which confirmed my suspicions. The fact that my wife had purchased another phone without informing me was suspect in the first place, but now that I knew she had received a message and ran to the restroom, I had even more reason to believe she was cheating on me. However, like the previous time, I did not want to simply face her. This time, I intended to catch her in the act and confront the guy to get his side of the story as well. I spoke with my cousin, who readily agreed to my plan. He told me about the hotel where she met this guy, so I patiently waited around the hotel all week to catch her in the act. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday passed, but she was not seen, so I believed she was meeting the guy at another hotel. Things went well for me on Thursday. I watched my wife enter the hotel during the afternoon, which was meant to be her lunch break, and right behind her was another guy I thought I'd seen somewhere but couldn't place. I waited 15 minutes before going after them. I told the receptionist that I was waiting for a guest. He offered to call the room, but I chuckled and told him it was unnecessary. 40 minutes later, I noticed them exiting the elevator together, their faces flushed with pleasure and expectation. My heart fell as I watched them, knowing what I was about to face. I approached them with all of my remaining courage, my hands quivering with wrath and betrayal. When my wife spotted me, her eyes widened in surprise and she stopped dead in her tracks. Before she could say anything, I held up my hand to silence her objection. I did not need to hear her reasons. I'd seen enough. I turned to the man next to her and asked whether he knew who I was. He nodded and informed me he had seen me at the office Christmas party last year, and thought I was her ex-husband because she had told him we were recently separated. I stared blankly at him as he went on to say that if he had known she was still married, he would never have been involved with her. I asked if he worked with Rachel, and he nodded, indicating that they were co-workers. My anger erupted like wildfire when I learned my wife had once again cheated on me with a co-worker. Without saying anything, I turned and walked away, leaving them dumbfounded. As I drove home, the weight of what I had observed hung over me like a smothering blanket. My marriage had ended, devastated beyond repair by the betrayal of the lady I had loved and trusted above all else. When I arrived home, I immediately began packing my luggage. I was furious and heartbroken about everything going on in my life. Rachel had presumably driven after me, and she walked into the home, gasping and puffing. She discovered me packing my luggage upstairs and confronted me instantly. She admitted that she had made a terrible mistake and pleaded for my pardon. She went on to tell how lonely she had felt, and in her desperation, she had decided to lie to this co-worker about our separation because she didn't want to be known as the cheating wife at her office. She explained that she had wanted to come honest with me for a long time but was terrified of my reaction. I yelled at her to get out of my face, as I couldn't take any more of her falsehoods. I was positive that if I hadn't caught her red-handed that day, she'd still be sleeping with him. Rachel then shifted tactics and began telling me that I couldn't blame her for everything and that I needed to accept this. This was my fault as well. I stopped packing and gazed at her, stunned by her audacity in suggesting such a thing. She went on to inform me that I hadn't slept with her in months after seeing her messages on Reddit, and that this had persisted even after my parents died. I was so enraged that I yelled at her, telling her that she had no right to blame me for her treachery, and that her acts were her own choice, regardless of the circumstances. I couldn't believe she was attempting to shift the responsibility to me, as if my sadness and pain were somehow responsible for her infidelity. But Rachel persevered, her words piercing the air like a knife. She accused me of neglecting her and failing to perform my responsibilities as a husband. She informed me that I had become too boring while grieving my parents' deaths, and suggested that instead of leaving the marriage, I should try to comprehend her point of view. She even insisted that we consider expanding our marriage, and that I was free to date other people if that's what I desired. Hearing her statements, I simply scoffed since I was fed up with this woman. Before leaving, I packed my bag and informed her that I would be sending her the divorce papers. I'm currently staying with my cousin, and Rachel has contacted me 1,000,000 times. Her messages span from apologies to accusing me of wrecking everything. She keeps telling me that I should view things her way and forgive her since she was simply lonely. So here I am on Reddit, wondering if I am the a-hole here. Am I to fault for pressuring my wife to cheat on me just because I was in mourning? Update 1. Wow, when I submitted this, I believed it would not even be tracked, but seeing 300+ comments under my post has been mind-blowing. I didn't think my narrative was particularly intriguing, but seeing you guys debate in the comments has been fun. To everyone who is criticizing me and saying I pushed my wife to cheat by not sleeping with her, well, I hope you never find yourself in a situation like I did. I love my wife and thought she would never cheat on me. But seeing her inappropriate chats with a random stranger affected me emotionally and mentally. I couldn't just dismiss everything and sleep with her like everything was fine. 2 weeks later, when my parents died, sleeping with my wife was the last thing on my mind. It's as if some of you have never experienced grief, because if you have, you will understand that everyone reacts differently, and losing my parents has been devastating. Throughout this, if my wife isn't faithful to me, and would rather sleep with someone else, it's not my responsibility. Yes, I felt bad at first, but after speaking with my cousins and reading some of the comments, I am convinced that this is entirely my wife's fault. She chose to sleep around since that is what she desired. I have no regrets about ending this marriage, and I have already discussed everything with my divorce lawyer, so we will move forward with my decision. I've also spoken with my in-laws, Rachel's parents. They had no idea she had cheated on me since she had neatly left that out, and instead told them I had moved away because I was still heartbroken over my parents. I told them everything that had happened, and they were as outraged with Rachel as I was. They later told me that they trusted me to make the proper decision. Update 2. It has been 5 months since my previous update. Sorry for the delay in updating, but I've been quite busy with the legal aspects of my divorce. I'm here to finally provide a positive update. Rachel and I are officially divorced. During the divorce procedures, that selfish woman attempted to seize my assets, but my lawyer was able to prove that she cheated on me, allowing me to keep my assets, including the $2 million inheritance from my parents. Rachel, who had no idea my parents had left me so much money, attempted to argue that she deserved half of it. However, the judge was not having it and denied her outright. I have wasted no time getting on with my life. Soon after moving out, I met an incredible woman named Sarah on Bumble. She is a wonderful single mother with a beautiful son named Jerry. Sarah lost her spouse a year ago, so she understands the sorrow of loss and grief that I have been experiencing. We've bonded on a deep level, connecting over our common experiences and a desire to provide a happy, caring home for our families. Sarah works really hard, and her perseverance and strength motivate me every day. I also like how she cares for her son entirely on her own. Jerry is a beautiful youngster, full of energy and curiosity, and I've enjoyed getting to know him. I am really fortunate and appreciative that both of them have embraced me into their life. Meanwhile, I've moved out of my cousin's home and found a wonderful condo for myself. I've also returned to my job because I enjoy working there and don't want to laze around the house doing nothing. It's taken me some time to adjust to living alone, but I have to say that I don't mind it. Yes, it can be lonely at times, but being alone is preferable to being with a cheating partner. I've also started seeing a therapist to help me heal from my parents' deaths and my history with Rachel, so that I can focus on constructing a brighter future. I miss my parents every day, and I hope they're proud of me for leaving a poisonous marriage. I know my mother would have been unhappy with Rachel for cheating on me. Also, numerous of you messaged me following my first update, asking me to get an STD test, which I did, and the results were luckily negative. It was a relief to have that peace of mind, knowing that Rachel's infidelity had not put me at risk. Rachel has made multiple attempts to contact me since our divorce, and even throughout it. She has expressed her regret. I've made it apparent to her that I've forgiven her for her previous transgressions, because there's no purpose in nursing a grudge anymore. However, she has also attempted to start a meeting with me following the divorce, and I quickly turned her down, telling her unequivocally that I have no interest in rekindling our relationship. I told her it was time for both of us to move on. I hope she gets this and stops harassing me. Update 3. It's been 3 months since my previous update, and since many of you have asked for one, I wanted to let you know that I recently took the next step in our relationship by asking Sarah to marry me. To my delight, she said yes, and we are now planning our future as a family. I couldn't be more delighted to start this new chapter in my life with Sarah and Jerry at my side. However, this is not the only update I have. Rachel appears to have been tracking me and Sarah on social media following our divorce, which I was unaware of until Rachel attempted to contact me many times the same evening Sarah uploaded our engagement photos. I declined to answer her phone, so she sent me multiple texts, asking if it was true, and how Sarah was just a gold digger who didn't really love me. I blocked her since her communications irritated me, and I saw no need to continue communicating with her. However, this woman then sent me a lengthy email in which she claimed that I had been deceiving her all along, and that I was solely responsible for the breakdown of our marriage. She wrote about how much she loved me, but I had shattered her heart by failing to trust her sufficiently. She chastised me for divorcing her without even attempting to talk things out with her, and she urged me not to marry Sarah, who was clearly not right for me. She commented that she couldn't believe I was back on my feet, and that Sarah would be getting a lot happier version of me. According to her, I was the one who escaped. I was exhausted reading her email because this woman seemed insane, repeating the same thing over and over again. I've blocked her on Gmail, so maybe she won't create a new email address simply to bug me. Looking back on all that transpired, I know that I was the one who escaped, not the one who got away. I'm grateful that I was able to exit a toxic relationship based on lies and betrayal, and that I can now live my life on my own terms with a partner who loves and respects me for who I am. With Sarah, I discovered a genuine, unconditional love based on trust and mutual respect. Together, we are creating a future full of love, laughter, and limitless possibilities, for which I am eternally grateful. To anyone going through something similar, my advice is simple. Never settle for less than you deserve. Trust your intuition, and don't be scared to leave a situation that no longer suits you. Life is too short to squander on individuals who do not value you. Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.